Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Life's Black Belts. I'm your host, Eric Alders, and it's my honor and privilege to be bringing you another inspirational guest. This particular guest I happen to know personally. Some guests I have on the show I get to meet virtually via internet or phone and then learn more about them in the interview. But today's Life's Black Belt is Emily Kwok. Emily is a three-time world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She is a black belt. She's a school owner. She owns a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school called Princeton Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Princeton, New Jersey. And I've actually had an opportunity to train with her as well. I got my Jiu-Jitsu training underneath both Emily, her partner, Professor Art Kynes, and her husband, Professor Jerry Hurtado as well. And I'm very happy to say that we've spent many years developing a nice relationship, both through business and friendship as well. And I really want to bring her on the show because I think there's so many angles that we're going to get to in this interview. Her mindset, her philosophy, her work ethic, so many different avenues that I think will inspire many. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Emily Kwok to the show. Emily, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
It's my absolute pleasure. So thanks for taking the time out. I know you got a busy schedule with the school and with the two girls at home. And how are they doing? Let's start with that. How are the two girls doing?
Doing good. A lot of poop this morning.
That's always a plus. And how old is Saya and Miyoki right now?
So Sai is 5 and Miyoki's 2.5, and they're both strong-willed little people, which is a great thing. Sometimes challenging. And this morning, before I came downstairs, Miyoki had scouted out a bin of or like a little Tupperware of these like brownie cookies that she really wanted. And I told her last night that, we're struggling with doing a number 2 on the potty. And so with Saya, I had created this great story about Mr. Poo-Poo needing to come out to play. And she went for that. And her preschool teachers had told me that a lot of times toddlers are afraid to poop on the toilet because it feels like they're losing a part of themselves. And so with Miyoki, we're at this stage right now where she can do number 1, no problem, but the number 2 is a struggle, and she usually goes and hides. And so we've been trying to encourage her to sit on the potty. And I told her, well, I'll give you a chocolate brownie cookie if you poop on the potty. But she wouldn't do it. And so she would do various interpretations of it. So in the last 24 hours, I've probably gone through like 5 or 6 pairs of training underwear because she'll maybe this is TMI for your listeners, but she'll do like half the job and then take everything off to go on the potty and finish the job. But in doing that, will smear poop all over everything. And so she did that last night. She did that this morning. And actually, so before I got downstairs, she had found the Tupperware of chocolate brownie cookies. And when I came downstairs, she was unusually quiet and she was running away from me. And when I found her, she had opened the Tupperware and was eating chocolate brownie cookies. And she's like, look, Mom. She's like, I went poop. And I'm like, no, you didn't.
No, you stole brownies is what you did.
Yeah. So
that's
yeah,
the joys of motherhood. And I don't know if I could claim any like first rights here as one of your first interviews that kicked off talking about poop. So
yeah, no, that's a first.
See that? Already we have groundbreaking coverage here. But I mean, listen, being a father myself of 12-year-old twin girls, I definitely relate to the potty training stage as one of the most challenging. I mean, just kids in general just is a 24/7 job. I remember when we first brought them home, it felt like I was babysitting for a really long time for a while. And then after like a couple of months, I'm like, I guess this is what it's just going to be like always. I guess we're not babysitting anymore. This is just our life now. So get used to drinking coffee all the time. That's what it was.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know I want to get into motherhood, but let's take a step back a little bit and again, we talked a little before we hit record on the podcast that a lot of your interviews that because I not only it's an honor being friends with you, but I'm a fan of yours and I'd like to follow you online, watch your training videos that you do whenever I had a chance to take class with you. But a lot of the interviews obviously focus on your jiu-jitsu career because that's what you're best known for, obviously reaching the world level. But I'd love to get a little bit more insight on who Emily is and where you got your start and how this world championship mindset came to be. And then we'll get into a little bit more of, becoming a mother and so on. So if you could take me back just a little bit briefly in the beginning and tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
So I'm the child of a mixed Asian family. My father is Chinese and my mother's Japanese. And I was born in Japan, but raised in Canada, in Vancouver to be specific. And I was raised speaking Japanese in the house. My father spoke it fluently. And I didn't really speak English, I think, until I started going to kindergarten or grade 1. I would say that most of my early life, I was pretty quiet and introverted and obedient. And I don't know if that was because I was just trying to make sense of how I fit into everything, because it was a foreign culture to me, or if it was just an aspect of my personality. But I would say up until I was about 13, 14 years old, you might not pick early Emily with Emily today. You might see them as completely different people. And when I was I just entered sort of middle school, high school, I started feeling like I wanted to do more. So I started, going out for different sports teams and joining yearbook and student council. And I would say that this is when leadership and community became really important to me. It was not a favorite thing of my parents. My parents were very much rooted in this idea of me being a good, obedient young Asian woman and learning to play the piano and potentially learning how to play golf or tennis and get good grades and just not be a nuisance. And instead, I was very outgoing. I was into the mix with sports. I was into the mix with different clubs and groups in school. And I was also sort of very motivated to make a living. My parents, we grew up middle class, and I don't think that I grew up wanting anything. Like if I needed lessons or if I wanted to do things, usually we had the means to do it. I received a weekly allowance, which was nice, and most of my friends did, and it wasn't anything exorbitant, but it was enough for us to go see a movie together or go hang out. And I remember at 14 thinking like, I would like to make more. And it wasn't that I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do. I just thought it would be nice to be a grown-up. And so I got my first job when I was 14 working at the corner store. And you could say that I learned some grunt work. I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning, walk to the store, put out all the flowers that needed to be watered, stocked all the shelves, got the store ready for the day, and then walked to school before school started. And then on the way home, I would walk back to the store, work at the store for a couple hours before going home. And it was, again, totally self-initiated, not anything that anyone asked me to do. And I enjoyed it. I was like the first one of my friends to have a job. I had friends who had like newspaper routes at the time, but I really prided myself on being able to earn some sort of an income. And from there, I learned in high school that I was a good student, but I was really creative, but I wasn't particularly well suited to play team sports. I wasn't great. I was not a natural at any team activity. I was a bench warmer on the basketball team. I was a bench warmer on the volleyball team. I wanted to play, but I just was not that great. And I don't know if it was that I wasn't coordinated using what I call like sports with tools, like with a stick or a ball. I don't know if I was better suited to like just grab people, or I was also the youngest in my class. My birthday was in October, so I was technically younger than most of my peers. I was the last to have my birthday. I was the last to learn how to drive. So maybe from a developmental perspective, I just wasn't there. But I wasn't great at athletics, even though I really wanted to be an athlete. And I was in theater, and I was really invested in the arts. A lot of people don't know that my educational background is actually in the fine arts. I have a degree in fine arts. I was very into painting and printmaking. And so exiting high school, that's what I pursued against my parents' wishes. So call it rebellious, but my rebellion was not going to the typical university and to instead go to the art school that was very highly respected in Canada. And also I received a degree out of the art school. So, you know, my parents' big thing was I needed to get a degree, which I did, but to their dismay, it wasn't at the university, and it was through the art school.
Well, let me ask you just real quick before we go further past college. Did your parents ever tell you why they transitioned from Japan to Canada?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. My mom will tell me this a lot, is my mother was used to have a brother in Japan. And when her brother was 29 years old, he committed suicide, stabbed himself in the heart. And after he stabbed himself in the heart, he was still alive. And when my grandparents had found him, he had then said, I made a mistake. I don't want to die. And they didn't know any better. They lived in the countryside, and they tried to drive him to the hospital, and he died before they could get there. And my family's, I shouldn't say my family. My mother is very spiritual, though she's not religious. She went to Catholic school growing up and in Japan. But she said that the night her brother died, that she had a really disturbing sort of spiritual dream. And it made her feel that there were some dark spirits around him. And when I was born in a time where, you know, I don't know the exact term of breech, but I wasn't born fully breeched. I was actually born folded in half butt first. So I was like double the width of a normal baby. And my mother was in labor with me for 36 hours. And they were certain that they were going to have to either abort me or I might run the risk of killing my mother. And my mom actually said, no, don't do it. She's going to come out. I know she's going to come out. You just have to let her do it. She's meant to be here. And I finally came out, but I was born with some physical issues. I couldn't my spine was crunched up, and I couldn't quite lower my legs normally. I think I had torticollis in my neck, so it's like a muscular defect. I couldn't turn my head to one side, and the doctors wanted to keep doing all these things to me, and my mother kept telling them, no, like, I can fix her. Like, we'll fix this on our own. We don't need surgery, you know? And so she was able to get to the point with me where she fixed my issues with my neck, and I was able to walk and do everything normally like other children. And as I got older, she really felt that there was something different about me. And I would always argue when she would tell me this. I'd be like, you're just saying that because you're my mother and you're supposed to say things like that. And she said, no. She's like, you know, when you were young, we could go to the supermarket and you might disappear, and we would go looking for you, and you would be walking up and down the aisles like a president. And she's like, everybody knew who you were. And she's like, people always were very drawn to you. And she told me that I exhibited sort of the same type of feelings that she would get from her brother. And in her way, she feels that there's some correlation between his death and my birth. I think I was born 6 or 8 months after he died. And she had felt that some part of his soul was reincarnated in me. And she felt that he committed suicide and he died because he was deeply misunderstood. She believed that he was really brilliant and creative. He was a judo champion. He was also a sumo champion. Okay. And she felt that he committed suicide because he was not really accepted by the conservative Japanese society around him. And so she felt that it allowed some darkness to get into his soul, and that's why he took his own life, because he just couldn't deal with life the way that it was there. So when I was born and she felt and saw the struggle I had coming into the world, and then saw how I interacted with people as I became a little person, she felt really strongly that I should not be raised in Japan, because she said, you were different. I could feel that. And I felt that if you were born there or we stayed there, that you would die too. Wow. And so they immigrated to Canada. And what's interesting about that is actually when I was 24, I ended up back in Japan for a year. I worked there as an English teacher, and it was the most miserable year of my life. I cried every day I was there, and I only stayed because I had committed to being there, and I don't usually escape my commitments. You know, I like to follow through. I cried every day for a year because of how much I hated living there. I learned a lot about myself, and I survived, obviously. But it's interesting that she had that premonition that I wouldn't do well in that country. And she believed in it so hard that even the year that I turned 29, I remember she came to visit me here, and she was like really worried about it. And she said, listen, you're going to turn 29 this year. You need to be very careful. And she's like, this was the year that my brother died, and you just need to be really careful. So I don't know what kind of strange woo-woo that was, but she had a feeling.
It's a mother and her instincts, and also I think proof that, you know, a mom, you know, and a father as well will do whatever they possibly can to give their children the best opportunities possible. And it's always like these little butterfly effects through life where these little decisions or big decisions have so many more impacts, where if she didn't make that decision, you know, what would your life have been? You know, who knows? Same thing for me or anybody else. If you were raised by the same parents in a variety of different countries around the world, what kind of life would you have lived with different friends, different surroundings, different schools, and different experiences? It's some people, I think, have these feelings, but not everyone honors them. So I don't know if it's a cultural thing or not, but obviously a very good decision that she made to at least give you the opportunity, even if nothing would have happened and you want to call it woo-woo. She still felt strongly enough about it. And ultimately the decision was made just to give you a better opportunity in life. And you can't, you know, count anything wrong against someone that has their heart in that particular way when making that decision. I never. So another thing I love about the podcast, even people that I bring on that I know, I learned so many things about it. I've never heard that story before. It's really a interesting. When I was, you know, asking you originally, like, how'd you make it to Canada? I was figuring that, you know, as your parents got a different job or whatever it may be. It was a very interesting twist on that. I wasn't expecting that, but and then it's Catholicism.
Yeah, no, it's you know, I think the older I get, I'm 39 now, and especially because I have my own children. I mean, you know, they say that you think differently about things once you have your own children, right? And maybe in some ways that's true. I think in a lot of ways it's not true. You know, like it's funny when I look at the judgments I've made in leading my own life up until this point, and the way that I feel about raising children compared to how my parents raised me. My parents raised me with a lot of fear, and maybe it was justly so, because they were immigrants and they didn't understand the culture well. They were first-time parents, and I'd had sort of a traumatic delivery. But I I think after as an adolescent, as I became more outgoing and I learned to trust and feel the world, I think Asians typically are not feelers of the world, or like older generation Asians, I should say, that there's a real sense of just sort of staying within your internal dynamics with your family or the people that you know or the culture that you know. And I remember struggling with this a lot growing up, that I knew I was half Japanese and half Chinese, but even being half Japanese and half Chinese made me Asian, but it didn't make me, I didn't understand who I was. Like, what is that? And at that, there's not a lot of Japanese-Chinese mixes. It's kind of like a faux pas because the countries don't get along well. And then I was being raised in Canada amongst a very multicultural group of people. So I didn't really grow up with a very strong sense of identity of like what I was a part of. And I would say that up until my late 20s, early 30s, I didn't fully embrace the fact that I was transient and I was kind of just something new. Like I was just what I was.
Right.
I wasn't meant to fit into a box very cleanly, and I couldn't. There still would be no box. And so I think, it's skipping ahead a little bit, but I think the trajectory of what I've done for myself relative to, finding myself through athletics in a sport where I was once again a minority and not fitting cleanly into a box, into some of the consulting work that I get into outside of jujitsu, because again, I don't fit cleanly into a box. I've just learned to really embrace that now. And I think that not being able to put your finger on exactly what I am or what I should be doing is a strength, versus I think in the past I used to look at that as a detriment, or I used to think it was a sad thing. How come I don't fit in? How come I'm not like everybody else? And I think there's a lot of people right now that are in the same boat, second, third, fourth generation immigrants who don't fit cleanly into a box.
I think it's hard to put many people inside of a box, although it seems what our society does. You put different cultures in different boxes, and even when you're watching the news, you often hear these like cultural identifications first, and then what took place. And I was raised, growing up, my one best friend was Chinese and my other best friend was African American. And my dad raised me to say that there's good people in this world, and there's classy people in the world, and there's non-classy, just people that are out to get you. If you surround yourself by good people, it doesn't matter what their background is. You have to like see past that. So maybe it's just a noble thing that I try to live my life by trying to not judge a book by its cover. Unfortunately, a lot in society, we try to immediately, and it's totally normal for you to look around and see, we always are trying to see how we fit in. Do we fit into a certain political circle or a social circle or a cultural circle that you looked at, especially coming in from Japan and having this mixed background and coming into Canada, which was, a little bit of everything. It's easy to look around and notice like, hey, I look a little bit different than everyone. What do you think it is that it'll take to get us to a point where we just are, and the fact that we might look a little bit different or talk a little bit different really won't make as much of a difference? Like, will we ever, we've come a long way, but will we ever reach a point where that is not the first and most important thing to identify ourselves by?
I think that it's a basic human instinct and need to belong to something, something outside of yourself. For most people, that will be family first, and then outside of family, you have close circles of friends and acquaintances, and then maybe other types of groups you identify with. I think that's just given. Teaching jujitsu and having a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school has taught me how powerful that community can be, especially when you're missing some other link. Some people don't have relationships to their families. And I had a very strained relationship to my family for a long time. So I always called my friends my family. I think that's what makes us human, is our ability to have these deep interconnected relationships with other people. The problem is, and like what I sort of find really alarming right now is when you can't see past literal boundaries, and you can't really see outside the edge of your box, if you will, especially if you find yourself wanting to be in a particular box, that you can't see that there's more things that we have in common with others than there are differences, you know? And for example, in Jujitsu, I always call it like one of the most interesting intersections in life, because in a Jujitsu school, you know, at my school anyways, we have every color of the rainbow training with us. We have a very inclusive community where we have LGBTQ, and we have, you know, mothers and, you know, fathers and children and single people and grandparents. You know, we have people who run very successful large companies. We have people who are going to college. We have people who are working at Starbucks. You know, it's a really broad intersection of life. And what I love most about it is that none of those labels or boxes that I just use to express the diverse type of people that are in our school really matter when they're training jiu-jitsu, because they've all kind of come together and they've decided that they want to learn this particular art, and they can sort of leave their differences at the door.
Right.
I think it's really beautiful, you know, and I think that I'm not religious, but I would imagine that that's kind of like what church does for other people, right? If you find yourself relating to that institution, you go through your church doors, and there you have a community of people who are not necessarily always like you, but you share one common belief. And I feel like we need more platforms that do that for us, things that bring us together, and at the same time don't have the need for us to shed light on why we're different from you, right? So like, you don't really find people going into a jiu-jitsu school, training jiu-jitsu, and then spending a lot of time saying, but we're so much better than, you know, the karate people down the street, or we're so much better than the MMA school down the street. Maybe you like the people that you train with, but like, we don't waste a lot of energy thinking about why we're different from everyone else. We just come together and we do something that we like. And I think that, you know, as humans, we need that. We need that so we don't become isolated, so that we don't become too siloed in the way that we think. That diversity, I think, is really, really important. And I hope that we get to a place where people stop concentrating on the edges and the walls, and they just start thinking more about what's inside those walls, you know?
I couldn't agree more. And I think martial arts is a great example of that. And there's many other ways in different, you know, groups you mentioned. I'm also not a super religious person, but there's lots of other organizations and ways and venues in which you could find that. But it's I think in using your example of being on the martial arts mat with all these different body types and cultures and personalities, having that when you're on that mat is trying to find a common interest. You know, what do we share together? We all have this goal of trying to use each other's bodies to try to get better, to experiment, to learn to be comfortable in very uncomfortable situations, to support one another, even though from someone that's not really involved with it from the outside, it might look violent at times. You then see a match end in a strong embrace and laughter being shared with one another. And maybe what needs to happen a little bit is the focus is not, yes, you know, be proud of why we're so different, but it doesn't have to be the focus. Because when you focus on what we share in common, I think that unites us more than divides us. And when we focus solely on why we look different or talk different, act different, unfortunately, it goes the opposite way. So I couldn't have said it better myself, and I agree with that for sure. I want to rewind just quickly before I jumped and asked you the question about what got you to move over to Canada. You had talked about coming up through school and going a little bit about against what your parents wanted to do and getting a little bit more into the artistic side of things. So when you decided to pursue that, were you artistic your entire life, or did you find that developed a little bit more as you got older?
So I was, my parents have drawings that I made with my father when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And my mother had kept drawings and paintings I had done throughout grade school. So you could say that I was always creative. My father was a brilliant artist. And the story that I was given was that he stopped painting and he stopped drawing and creating because he needed to get a real job to support the family. So my relationship to creativity was strained for a lot of my life because I wanted to be expressive. I wanted to divulge. And I had a father who, for very practical reasons, put that to the side. And it wasn't valued. You know, I had applied to, I had very good grades in high school. And I could have easily gotten into a lot of the local universities. But when it came time to apply, I sort of went against the wishes of my parents, and I physically did not submit applications to the schools that they wanted me to go to because I knew that they would not be in the vein of what I wanted to learn. And I only applied to the art school that I wanted to go to. Thank God I got in because it was, you know, Emily Kwok Institute of Art and Design at the time was one of Canada's premier art schools. And they had a habit of, like, they were known for not accepting a lot of students straight out of high school. They wanted students who had had a little bit of life experience, more depth to their portfolios. So a lot of the students that attended had often gone through 2-year diploma programs at local colleges, or were often people who had graduated with other degrees or come from other professions and felt like they really made a mistake. And so they said that about 10% of the student population in the first year was out of high school. So that was, I think it was probably less than like 50 people that would have been straight out of high school for the first year program. I was, again, the youngest person in my class. I was 17 when I started going to college, and everybody else was, I was going to school with people in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And I was going to school with people who were dentists who had regretted doing that because their parents pushed them into it. And here they were, after being a dentist, deciding that they wanted to be an artist. Scientists, NASA scientists who had done incredible work, who were kind of semi-retired, that were like, I should have gone to art school. So, so it was interesting, you know, that from an early age, even though I was sort of an obedient kid and I always did the right thing, I had a very strong will about certain, you know, parts of my identity. And one of them was that, no, I need to be creative.
Well, following a passion is what seemed to guide you. And then you graduate with that art degree? Because I know earlier on you mentioned going for a year in Japan, but teaching English. How does that transition from going to art school?
Yeah, so I started going to Emily Kwok when I was 17. And then I had grown up through, you know, just being a fan of popular culture, wanting to come to New York. And a lot of my art professors would say in modern art survey class, don't think that a piece of art will be done any justice looking at it in a textbook or a slide. You have to go see it in person. And Vancouver, you know, is now a very metropolitan city, but and it's always been a great city, but it had a very small art gallery with a lot of local works, but nothing on the level that you would find in you know, New York or London. And so I had become really fascinated with this idea of traveling to New York. And so when I was 19, I got a student work visa and I took a semester off and I moved to New York for the first time. And I would live in New York and just like live it up and work random jobs, get life experience for the next 3 years of my life. So I was 19, 20, 21. Every time I had a summer break or extended break, I would be in New York just getting life experience because I love the energy here so much. Then I was slated to graduate, and after graduation, I would no longer have access to a student work visa. And so I became extremely depressed because I wouldn't be able to work in New York without a visa. And my mom suggested, why don't you go to Japan? You know, because in Canada, I don't know how it works in the US, but in Canada, for a lot of people under the age of 30, there are a lot of interesting work abroad programs that you can take part in. And so you can sort of be granted a 1-year work visa to go to Australia or Europe. And I just thought to myself, anything has to be better than staying here. You know, and it's funny, when you grow up in a place, you often don't value what is there. You know, like growing up in Vancouver, I didn't really see Vancouver for what it was. I saw Vancouver for being like, it was a small city with no culture and nothing going on, and everything closed early. And I wanted dynamism. I wanted something different. And so I applied for a job as an English teacher because I was qualified. You know, I had a university level degree. And as long as you had a bachelor's degree, you often qualified to teach English as a second language in a lot of schools. So I just took the opportunity. I was hired 3 weeks later, and 3 months later, I was on an airplane going to Japan for a year. And I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to practice my Japanese, for me to connect more deeply with my mother's side of the family, which is all still in Japan, and just be in another major city. And I found that I just hated it.
What was it? What did you hate about it?
It's an extremely not patriarchal. Yeah, it's a very patriarchal culture. So
very male dominant, not focusing so much on the females, or what do you mean by that?
Very much so.
Okay.
And, you know, if you also think about it from the lens of, it's a very homogenous country, and I look like I belong there in many ways. So I would get side eye. I would sort of be looked at like I was some sort of an idiot because I didn't necessarily understand the intricacies of the culture that well. You know, I laughed too loud. I spoke too much. I walked a weird way. I mean, I was criticized for everything.
Wow.
And it was really hard for me to make friends because other foreign teachers that were there thought I was a local. And all the locals thought I was local. So they didn't, you know, like if I was Caucasian or if I was green, I would stick out, and other people that would stick out would then probably gravitate towards me. Or the locals would have been a little bit nicer because they'd understand that I didn't understand.
Right.
But I looked like them. So therefore everyone assumed that I knew what was going on, and the people I wanted to connect with didn't naturally gravitate towards me because I didn't look like them, right? I looked like everybody else. So I was really alone. And I'm a very social creature. So it was torturous for me. And actually the only thing that kept me alive for that year was jujitsu. I had a jujitsu school that I had been connected with prior to moving to Japan. An old friend had connected me with a contact. And once I arrived in Tokyo and I settled in, this gentleman named Takahiro Iso and Kinya Hashimoto very graciously took me by the hand and took me around to some of the different dojos that they worked out at and helped get me situated, helped me find a place that would be good for me to train based on my hours. They found me a small school in a town a suburb called Koiwa, under a brown belt. And Takashi Ochi, the teacher there, spoke some English. And he was himself apparently a really brilliant scientist, like a biochemical something or other. And he didn't want to do that anymore. He just wanted to teach jujitsu. So he was a brilliant mind that went into jujitsu. And I understood enough Japanese to get on, but he tried really hard to speak to me in English, like to teach in English. He tried really hard. I brought some friends that I had made in the teaching community to train as well. So there was a group of 4 or 5 of us that were foreigners that he would teach classes to at 10:30 at night, because we didn't finish teaching until 9 p.m. And it was just enough time for us to take a train, get to the school, and he would teach us from 10:30 to 11:30 p.m. A few times a week. And it would be early enough that we could actually just rush back to the train station and get the last trains home. And if it was not for these people that I trained with and made me feel like I had a place to go, I don't think I would have survived that year. And what was really ironic about that too was when I would compete in Japan, I was physically a lot bigger than most of the women, which is funny because I'm not an overwhelmingly, like I'm not a large person here, but over there I was like a giant. And so after I competed in a couple tournaments, women wouldn't sign up for tournaments anymore if I was there because they were like, oh, she's too big. She's too strong. She's going to win. We don't want to fight her. So even in the sport that I really enjoyed, I was a little bit of an outcast. And I remember at my going away party that, you know, my jujitsu team came out to. I sat around this table at an izakaya, which is like a Japanese like bar type situation. And we were all eating and drinking. And so many of the guys had said, we're so sad you're leaving. I wish I would have taken more time to become a better friend with you because you're such a great person. And I'm sad that you're leaving now. And I mean, it's just, it was so funny to me because I was there for an entire year.
Right.
And,
like, where were you?
yeah, I was like, I could have used you as a friend. But what's interesting is like a lot of Japanese people, I think, I've been told this, that they're very insular. So like they make friends in elementary school. And a lot of the times the friends that they have outside in their adult life are people that they're still deeply connected to from elementary or high school. And it's very hard for them to take on outsiders at a later stage in life, you know? So yeah, it was a trip. So it was not me. I think this kind of adds to what I said earlier in our discussion about being transient and just kind of learning to embrace who I was. I wanted so badly to go there and feel like I belonged, right? I was like, maybe if I go to Japan, I'll finally feel like I belong somewhere because these people, like, we look like each other. And maybe I understand the culture better because I was raised in an Asian culture, in an Asian household. And then I went there and I discovered once again, I just stuck out like a sore thumb and I did not belong. So, you know, this theme of me wanting to belong and never belonging anywhere has kind of created an interesting situation because now with a lot of things that I do, particularly running my school, it's very important for me to create an inclusive culture where anyone could walk in and feel like they belong because I never belonged anywhere.
But the mind-blowing part of that is that you may not have that approach now had you not had all these previous experiences that impacted you so much. And when we're going through these things, often in life, we don't know why we're going through them. We often ask, you know, why me, as opposed to, you know, what's my lesson here? What am I supposed to be learning from this? And I think, you know, probably now looking back on that, you could realize all these uncomfortable situations that you had to navigate through, you know, and also trying to constantly find, you know, whether it's happiness or the feeling of belonging to a group everywhere outside of then from within, which, you know, I would probably believe that's really where you have to connect with first, is feeling, you know, okay with who you are. And then you can kind of fit in different places. But do you think that at all, that maybe these experiences were a catalyst to how you're running your school now and being so dedicated to having that inclusive culture at your school?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, as much as they've pained me, you know, there have been a number of things that have happened over the course of my life that I wouldn't wish on anyone, you know, in terms of how they made me feel. But, you know, what do they say? Life will never give you something that you can't handle.
Right.
And I've been through some pretty terrible situations with regards to, you know, how I felt about myself. You know, how I felt about myself, how somebody else or some other group made me feel about myself, and made me really think about how to determine my own self-worth. And I don't regret any of it. Like, I would never change what I went through because it just gives me that much more of a sense of how to be. You know, I've learned a lot in life what not to do. Like, I've learned a lot because I've been on the receiving end of egregious behavior, you know, and I think that I've always been someone who I think observation and processing has kind of been a strength of mine. Part of it was probably also going to art school, just like learning how to take something in and deconstruct it and then put it back out there in the world, you know. And it's a tricky thing, you know, to help someone feel great about themselves, and to be in a business where you're trying to bring the best out in people. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, I turned 38 in October, and a friend of mine, as a joke, was like, "Oh, happy birthday. What are you, 25 this year?" And I said, "Absolutely not." I wouldn't trade 25 for 38 ever. And unlike maybe some other people, I really enjoy getting older, because I feel that every year of my life is another life learned. And I mean, like, just the things I know today that I didn't know 10 years ago, the places that my life is so rich today. I often use the analogy, like, my dance card is full. I don't have time. I don't have space to make new friends and do things, because I have such high quality people around me. And if I make time for you, it's because I really want to. I'm not trying to fill my time anymore.
Right.
You know, like, I think there was a stage in my 20s where it was about filling time. And now it's about, like, man, I have all these really amazing individuals around me and families around me. And who do I feel like tapping into today? Like, whose energy can we share today? And what can I give them, and what are they going to give me? And it's such a beautiful feeling. I can't imagine being in a place where I didn't have this, you know, but it takes years to build. It takes years to build.
It really does. It takes time to realize what the difference is between an acquaintance and a really good friend. And I could relate to this in my own way. I remember being a teenager in college and in a fraternity and living that whole, fun, crazy life, and my dad's like, how you doing? You making friends at school? And I'm like, oh, I have like, 150 friends. And he's like, no, you don't. I'm like, no, literally, I know like 100 something people. He's like, if you can count your good friends on one hand, consider yourself blessed. And those are going to be the people that are going to be there for you when it's inconvenient to be there for you. They're going to be there for you because they love you and care about you, not just because you're someone fun to go to the mall with or hang out with or have a beer with, but they literally, they say, friends are family. And we have that as well. We have friends in our life that my daughters call aunt and uncle, but are not blood related, but are closer than some of their actual, real cousins and other relatives that are out there. So I think that does come with life experience when unfortunately, you see some darker sides of people and how they could treat you or take advantage of you or manipulate you. And then it takes time, unfortunately, through those, mistakes to learn how to pick the right people to surround yourself by. And sometimes even harder, the people that are in your life that are toxic, being able to separate yourself from them. And that's a challenge I think a lot of people face.
Yeah. And, like, one of the things I learned through an unfortunate period I had in Jujitsu was, I believe it's an Oprah quote, you have to teach people how to treat you. And I mean, as I've gotten older and I've been burned, I've learned how to work out of those situations much earlier, and most people will say now of me, they'll be like, boy, that Emily, she doesn't tolerate shit from nobody. And I'm like,
right.
I don't. And I start early. I don't give airs about letting you believe that you're going to get away with everything with me. And then 2 years into our relationship, I blast you. Right. No, I start with you really early. Like, if you do something that makes me uncomfortable within the first day of our meeting, I'm going to very gently and kindly tell you, hey, like, Eric, you called me chick the other day, and I just want to let you know I'm kind of not okay with that. I'd much prefer if you just called me, this woman or Emily.
Right.
I find that term derogatory, or whatever it would be. But I just find that when you establish your boundaries of what's okay and not okay with people as you meet them, and you're genuine, and I'm not insulting you. I'm not being rude, but I'm just clarifying what makes me comfortable and uncomfortable. I think that allows people to grow in a much healthier way around each other, versus a lot of times, you have scenarios where, man, it really bothers me that you call me chick all the time, but I don't feel comfortable saying that to you. So then I go and tell your brother and your mother and your best friend and all your students. Yeah. It just hurts me so much when Eric does that. And God, like, why does he do that? You know, like, why does he have to talk down to me? And then I just create cancer, you know?
Absolutely.
I really think that there's such a better way that we can be to ourselves and to each other. So it's important that as I've learned these things in life where I've been deeply hurt, I think about how I could do things better so that I don't encounter this again myself, and how I could teach other people to eliminate that from their lives too.
Yeah, well, again, because we always want to fit in often, even though people are, doing their actions or their words are hurting us. Sometimes people won't speak up and be honest about it because they're afraid of hurting someone else's feelings, or they're afraid they're not going to be included in that group anymore. And what they don't realize is that often leads them down the absolute opposite path that they're trying to achieve. And when you actually hold to your values and your morals, and you're honest, and you don't have to talk behind people's back. I mean, it's another thing. I don't know if it's a martial arts thing that we share as well, but I'm a very honest person where if I hear there's a murmuring amongst parents that something went on that they didn't like, instead of like letting it take place, I go, pardon me, ma'am, could you come in the office real quick? Let's sit down. And I just address it immediately, because that's how I want people to be with me. If someone doesn't like something that I've done or said, I'm not perfect. Please have the honesty to come and speak to me about it. As long as you've learned through experience, which I try to do all the time, that I could handle that in a mature way and have a conversation with you and acknowledge my errors and learn from it. I mean, that's kind of what life's all about, as opposed to just getting defensive and attacking people. So I agree with you that some people think that's not going to lead to friendship, but I think when people really learn that you're not someone that tolerates nonsense, and really no one should. But when you know who you are, and you know the types of people you want to surround yourselves by, I think people are attracted to that, because you also promote this confidence about you of knowing what you like and what you don't like. And there's a lot of people that walk around this world just not even knowing what they do like or don't like. So they just kind of like drift with the wind wherever is popular at the time, unfortunately.
Well, I think, it kind of, again, thematically ties back to this, like, I didn't belong anywhere, so I had to sort of be okay with myself. And at this time in my life, I don't really care if you don't like me. It's a really liberating thing.
Yeah, it is.
To feel like I don't need to operate under anybody else's agenda but my own. And I'm not doing what I do to please you. I'm doing what I'm doing because it pleases me. And hopefully whatever I'm doing will be good for humanity, or it'll be productive in some way. But it's when you are living a life that is for everyone else, essentially, I think you can build up a lot of resentment towards those people and yourself, and a lot of self-hatred. And I think there's a lot of people trapped in this right now, where they don't understand the dynamics of who they are, and they spend a lot of time doing things for others because they think that's what they're supposed to do, when in reality it's not letting them express themselves. And I'm so thankful for some of the friends that I've had over the years who have helped bring these lessons to light. And, the other thing I really learned is people who really deeply care about you and want you to be well and succeed in life. Sometimes those are the people that are not going to tell you the things that you want to hear. They're going to be the people that will tell you the things that you need to hear. And they are there to serve as like an authentic guard, if you will. They're not there to just let you, be disingenuous. They kind of hold your feet to the fire. And for that reason, I think if you're my friend, I will always be 100% honest with you. I can't promise that you're going to like everything that I say or do, but you will know that you have the truest version of me. And the people that can handle that type of honesty, I think we end up becoming really, really deep friends, the kind of friends that, if you needed the shirt off my back, I would give it to you. And the only way that I know that you would do in reverse is because I can tolerate your honesty with me. Right. And I'm much more interested in having deep quality relationships with people that aren't always peachy. Sometimes friendships are hard. But I think the commitment to working through the hard times with your friends or your family, whoever it may be, I think that's what forms a real bond.
100%. I couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
Can I ask the transitional question to what you're doing mostly with your life now? You mentioned that you fit in a little bit in Japan because you had a gym to train at and you started prior to that. But what I hadn't asked you yet is why jiu-jitsu? Why did this young woman that was navigating through life and going into art school and all that and was not athletic and was a bench warmer in all these sports, like where did jiu-jitsu come from out of all of that?
So as I said, I was a big fan of, popular culture. I like watching movies. I like, watching bad TV. When I was in my, I was like 18, 19, it wasn't a particularly good movie, but Will Smith came out in this movie called Ali, about Muhammad Ali. And it was about boxing. And it got me a little pumped up and made me think, oh, boxing might be kind of fun. And during this time, I was working out consistently. Then the following year, another movie came out called Girl Fight by a new director named Karen Kusama. And it was the breakthrough role that Michelle Rodriguez came through it. And I fell in love with the movie. One, because it was sort of set in, I think it was set in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And so there was the New York element of it. And there was, underdog chick who decided that she wanted to become a boxer and ends up becoming better than the people that she knows. And, eventually ends up being her own boyfriend up. So I was like, what a great movie. And I used to watch it a lot. And I thought, I should go see about boxing. I wasn't really happy with, the amount of time I was putting in at the gym, which was like 2 or 3 hours. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, I'm running on the treadmill and I'm lifting weights. And how come I don't have the athletic physique that I want? And so I looked up an old friend who was really into martial arts. And I had asked him to put me in touch with a good boxing gym. And so this friend, Roy Duquette, still one of my best friends, he was a trainer, took me to a couple boxing gyms. I tried boxing and I found out that I was terrible at it. There was something about my stance. I kept tweaking my knee. Boxing just required too much coordination from me, and I just wasn't good at it. So upon his advice, he said, why don't you come with me to a ground wrestling class? And I said, well, what is that? And he goes, we'll go to Sambo. And I said, what's that? And he said, it's like Jujitsu. And I was like, what's that? And I had, this is like 2000, 2001. I had no idea what any of this was. And it was in Vancouver, mind you, not LA. So I went with him to the Sambo class, which is kind of, it's another form of grappling with a lot of concentration on throws and legs. That's sort of based in a Russian style.
Right.
And I went to try the class and I really enjoyed it. And so I joined up for the month. But the instructor was old school Russian and all the students were like young Russian boys. And they would not let me do anything. Like I was allowed to perform like wrist lock escapes or something on them, but I wasn't allowed to throw. I wasn't allowed to do any of the locks. I wasn't allowed to grapple because I was a woman. So, there was this theme of, you're not allowed to do these things yet. And I got frustrated. And then one of the classmates had said, hey, you might want to come try this thing called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with me. It's like Sambo, but it's better because the people will let you train, and they won't be weird with you because you're a chick. And so I was like, okay, so I tried it and it was very similar. And then I decided, you know what, I'll do this instead. And at the time, I picked it up really as another hobby, which is laughable to me because when I meet people in jiu-jitsu now and they know me as an instructor, they will often come in a little intimidated or in awe, and they'll be like, oh, like, I don't think I could ever be like you, or you're so amazing. And I'm like, I'm not who you think I am.
Right.
I totally stumbled into this because I sucked at boxing, and I wasn't born a champion. I wasn't born an instructor. I wasn't born doing any of these things. I had to work really hard at it. And oftentimes in situations where people didn't want me there. And so, so it's funny because it was kind of a mistake. And I just really enjoyed expressing myself because I wanted to be athletic. So after finding something that seemed to resonate with my body, like I was able to do it much better. I had more success grappling than I'd ever had doing any team sport. And it was a hobby. It took over my life. I was training 5-6 days a week. Wherever I could train, I was training. And in Vancouver in the early days, like there were like 4 or 5 schools. I would just go anywhere I could. And because I was a woman, and at the time, again, like an anomaly always, like there weren't a lot of women that were pursuing it. I just kept training and training and training and training wherever I went. And it was just a big, big hobby until 2006, 2007, I was competing a lot, and people started asking me like, well, why don't you make this a full-time thing? And I was like, I don't think you can make it a full-time thing. And they were like, oh, well, you probably could if you ran a school. But I didn't take it seriously because my parents had really raised me to believe that the only way to make a life was to have some sort of a white-collar career. And I had already defied them by becoming, an artist, if you will. And I should mention that after art school, the way I made my way back to New York initially or New Jersey, was that one of my first roommates that I had met when I was 19, the first year I moved to New York, hired me to become a creative director at his event management company. And so I always had very tangible work skills. That was actually a conflict of mine, was how do I express myself creatively but have the need to do really productive work? Like it never interested me to just go, be creative without a particular goal in mind. Like creative for the sake of being creative is beautiful, but that wasn't me. And I wanted to do something that was tangibly productive all the time. And so when I decided to invest in Jujitsu, I accepted a full-time job running a school. And I would say that the bridge between Jujitsu and being an artist was that I just changed mediums,
right.
I had just gone from being a painter to a performance artist, because for anyone who's trained Jiu-Jitsu, or I would probably say any physical movement, any physical discipline, when you are first learning how to do anything, it's difficult, right? Like learning how to throw a punch the first 1,000 times is a concentrated effort. But once you have an understanding and your body sort of subconsciously embraces these movements, it's like your body learns another language. And then you're able to sort of express yourself, not only technically, but sometimes artistically. And so I think for me, I was able to leave the making of physical objects behind because my body had a way to still express itself. And that's what felt beautiful to me about Jiu-Jitsu, was expressing passion through action. And I found like over the years, like certain things have started to sort of pull on me again. Like there has been a sense and a feeling that I want to make physical art again. I want to do things in a different medium, not just physically. But that's really how I see it, is that, I think of it more as a creative force that I've always had, and how that creative force interacts with the world might shift over the years.
Well, I think it's for people that are not in jiu-jitsu, hearing it as an artistic form, they may be confused by hearing it, but the way you explained it, I think will help. But having practiced myself as well, I can completely relate to what you're talking about, where to my own fault, sometimes someone will do a sweep on me, and literally like in midair, I'm observing what they're doing in total awe of how beautiful it was. on doing this, and the body language, the ability to connect with your mind, body, and spirit. Where I'll explain to my brother, it's like my yoga. I have everything that people get, I think, out of athleticism, of whatever sport they're in, whatever people get out of art, out of the strategy that's involved with chess, and getting your mind involved. I feel like martial arts and jiu-jitsu specifically kind of brings all of these different variables into a harmony together, which is very artistic, even though from an outside standpoint could look violent at times, but it's not done with ever any sort of animosity. In essence, I believe jiu-jitsu translates to the gentle art. So it's within the name itself. Where did you transition from? A lot of people that do jiu-jitsu get involved in competition at some point just to test it out, because almost every match you have every day in class is little mini competitions of testing yourself. But where was the desire and mindset to continue to climb that ladder to try to test yourself at higher levels? Was this your classmates saying to you how talented you were, your coaches pulling you aside and say, hey, you're special? Was it you realizing it in yourself? What took the step to that next level up that most people may never even consider?
Trying to find somebody like me. It went back to this like deep feeling of like, I just want to find somebody like me. Even today, much less so, but like women in jiu-jitsu are often still a great minority. You still find schools with 0 women, and most of my jiu-jitsu career, the vast majority of it, actually all the way up until I was a black belt, my main training partners have always been men. Always. Small men, big men, wide men, thin men, but a man. And from early on, my first competition was when I was 6 months into the sport. It was, could I potentially find another female, just another woman? Forget how big or small she is or how advanced she is. I just want to see someone like me doing it. And that's what got me started in competition. And for the first, I would say, half of my career, that was what made me want to compete, was just finding, is what I'm doing and where I'm at good enough? Will I fit in with another woman if I meet them? That's what it was.
Wow.
So going to all these competitions was about I'm over here isolated in Vancouver or in Japan or wherever, but what I'm doing is enough. I'm like you. I can hang with you.
It's very interesting how it always comes back to that same mindset following you through your life of the consistency of trying to fit in and find people that are similar to you and that, shares the similar, ideas and values and goals and so on. A lot of people have a lot of different goals for competition, and I never guessed that would be the answer of you've competed at the world level and won, which must, have so many emotions involved. And here you are, I'm sure, excited about reaching those levels. But for you, probably finding these other women that he had a chance to compete with and know that they were somewhere else in the world doing the same thing you were, probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Did that hold the same amount of weight in your mind of actually finally finding that? Or was the actual gold medal, bigger? Because of the way you're speaking, it almost seems like that relationship and discovery of finding like-minded women doing what you did seemed even more powerful from how you're describing it.
Yeah, it was. I'll tell you, at my lowest point, the thought that really permeated my existence was I would show up at competitions and literally tell myself, I don't belong here. I'm not worthy of being on the mats against these people. And a big part of fixing my psychology as an athlete, this happened shortly after I won the World Championships. I went through a really terrible time because of the team I was associated with. I went through a horrible time psychologically where they had made me feel like I did not deserve to be there. And it took me a number of years to find myself again. And this last time that I competed in August it had been 6 years since I'd fought. And a lot of things in my life had changed. I had children. I was in a much happier place. I had, successful career. I had a school. But it's funny, like when you say that, oh, well, you know, what feel like, was it the gold medal? Was it this feeling of belonging? And like, it was knowing that I prepared to win, going and fighting, winning, walking off the mat, and then saying to myself, I belong here. Like, I did okay. Like, I was in my element. I did what I needed to do to be a respectful opponent. That was like such a great feel. Like, it made me feel whole again, to feel like I belonged there. I walked around with my head in shame a lot because I just never felt like I belonged there.
And from the outside standpoint of people seeing you compete at these highest levels, they must have had a total different viewing of you, as many people do. As you say, they come into your school and they've seen your matches, they see your videos, they attend your seminars, which you do around the world. And you're like, well, I'm just Emily, and all I've pretty much done is show up every day and just try to do my best. But I have the same. It's one thing I try to bring out in this podcast is that whether you're talking to someone that's in your class or you're talking to a world champion, we all have as humans these significant needs to feel like we're a part of something, that we fit in, that we know who we are, that we belong, that we're on the right path, that we're just all out there just trying to do our best, and that we all have our failures. And I think sometimes people look at the end product. They look at a Professor Emily on the mat, leading classes, having a successful school, and at the highest level. And sometimes they just put you up on this giant pedestal, and they forget that, every day you go home and you also have to be a mother and a wife and a worker and a citizen and all these other things that you have to take on. It's difficult sometimes for people to not just focus on the end result of what you have now, but to really understand the journey that you've had to go on to reach where you're at.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you're doing that's quite beautiful is you're really humanizing like what it is to be a black belt.
Mm-hmm.
A black belt is not like whatever you may have that level of achievement in, it's not given to you because you're just fucking awesome.
Right.
Given to you because, what is it? Somebody said, oh, well, black belt's black because of how much dirt is accumulated on the belt after so many years of practice. And it's true. I mean, like, I think, I say it to my kids all the time when we're on the mats teaching kids classes. Whenever I see them a little freaked out or holding back, I said, who do you think has tapped out the most in this room? And they like point at themselves or they look at each other. And I said, it's me. I have tapped out more than all of you, including the other instructors. That was the other thing that was funny for me going to the Master Seniors Worlds this year is, Master Seniors is an age class, but if you're a black belt, you're a black belt. So like I was competing against black belts that were new black belts, like 9 years into being into training jujitsu. I've been training jujitsu going on 18 years. I was like a grandma. And so it was so funny, like going in and fighting from that place of like, I've just been here a really long flipping time. And I just never went away. I just never faded out. And so when people come up to me and they say, oh, I've been a big fan, or this really helped me, like it's like, it strikes me when I meet purple belts and brown belts today who have said that my DVD with Stephan Kesting helped them survive the first 3 years, or I wouldn't have stayed in jiu-jitsu if somebody hadn't given me your DVD. And I see how far along they are. And I'm just like, that's so incredible that something I did that I was really self-conscious about at the time has helped you so much that it's allowed you to be another body in the room. And you've probably kept others in as a result of it too. But people do think, and I'm guilty of it too. When I meet my heroes, I look at people and I just think, wow, this person's incredible. But when you really gain insight, if you're lucky enough to have some insight into what has made them the person that they are, you recognize that you're much closer to them than you would ever think, and we just don't have, it's just not often that we have opportunities to speak this way, right? Like I'm not somebody who likes to lead with accomplishments. I don't walk into a room and say, oh, like I've won this and I've won that. What have you done? That's not how I relate to people. I relate to people with like, how are you feeling today? Not good. Me either. I had to wipe crap off the walls for like 3 hours. But these are the things that make us human. And I think that despite what you accomplish that someone else might admire, it doesn't take away, it should never take away from the fact that you're human. And that goes for the person in question, right? Like, it's always, it's sad to me when I meet someone who has accomplished a goal or a feat that other people might think is incredible, something that other people might think that they could never do. And then when you meet those people, they've somehow talked themselves into thinking that they're really special too.
Right.
Like I said, there's way more that we all have in common than not. And it's some of us have just pursued a different path in life. And that's the other thing. Like, some people have been incredible at being what they are because it's all they've ever done. Like 30 years of their life has just been spent riding a bicycle. That's why they're the best bicycle rider ever. Versus another person who's done something for 30 years, has gone to school and gotten a doctorate and raised a family and picked up Taekwondo recreationally in the last 5 years. I mean, that life is worth just as much as somebody who's achieved, gold medals or crazy times in riding bicycles. But it's just, we've quantified our lives in a different way. And to have your values spread out over a few different ambitions versus just one is just as valuable. But somehow we don't always calibrate it that way.
Yeah, well, what you said, to your students as well, that, again, the black belts probably failed more times than, a white belt's ever even attempted. And that's similar to, the comparison of what I'm trying to do with the podcast in life as well. Like, how many times in life are you, for a metaphor, getting tapped out in life, whether it's the friends turning their backs on you or career issues or relationships or marriages, children, all these things that get thrown at you, making to certain ages in life, just, hopefully if you keep an open mind, just continues to educate you and teach you and mature you and give you new ways of looking at life and approaching things and learning about who you are and what your purpose is here. And just because you may reach black belt in martial arts, or you think you're a black belt in life because you're a millionaire or successful at whatever it may be, what is black belt? I mean, I got my black belt in a traditional martial arts system when I was 18 years old. I'm 41. The last 7 years of me pursuing jujitsu have been way more challenging for me as a martial artist than the last 20 years have been. I love teaching, and I'm sure you do too, but I fell in love with this as a student, and and I've given you and Art and Jerry a lot of credit, and will always hold a very important part in my life for reinvigorating and bringing the passion as a student back out in me. And to do that as a teacher, and I try to do that with my students, to be able to give that to someone is like one of the greatest gifts in the world, to just get them to be passionate about something. And if it's passionate about many things, that's awesome. Just realize that no matter what level of achievement you hit, all you're really doing is getting a good foundation. It doesn't mean that you're now an expert and there's no more learning to be done. I've learned so much since I've become a black belt, and I'm sure you have as well, achieving multiple levels as a black belt and a champion. Sometimes I learn more than I was as a black belt when I'm teaching a new white belt. A 7-year-old could ask me a question in a way I never thought of before. And something like that sits with me. Have you had those experiences as well as a teacher?
Yeah. I mean, look, I love teaching beginners. I actually think it's the hardest thing to do, because you're teaching somebody who has absolute zero frame of reference in doing what you do so well. And you have to get them acquainted with how to listen, how to use their bodies, how to learn any of this. And a lot of the times with beginners, they teach me that, humbling lessons. One of the biggest ones is I can never assume that anyone knows anything. What I mean by that is when we become comfortable as people, not just as teachers, but as people, when we become comfortable operating a certain way within a certain context, we assume everybody else gets it. And then we find ourselves angry or upset when people don't do it the way that we do, or they don't see it the way that we do. And you just cannot assume that everyone knows everything. You know, like when I teach people, I always try to teach I ask myself, did I teach them everything? Like if I had to teach this to somebody who knew nothing, like a figure skater, if I had to teach jujitsu to a figure skater, would I have expressed myself clearly? And I could be talking to a room full of black belts, but I think that way because I've understood through life experiences that your normal is not my normal. Even though we're living in New Jersey, even though we're relatively around the same age and we're both martial artists, you grew up in a different family with a different culture and a different set of principles of what was wrong and right. And we may think relatively alike, but I cannot calibrate my sense of normal on your normal, you know? And so as a person in this world, I just never assume that like what I'm working with and who I'm around will get me like that. Someone once pointed out to me, wow, like when you meet people, you don't really care who they are, do you? And I said, no, I don't. Like I can't find I'm not one of these people that will only gravitate towards people that just look like me or dress like me or behave like me. I'll talk to you if we're sitting on the bus together. I'll talk to you if I meet you in front of the bathroom at Starbucks. I'll talk to you if you're a mom picking up your kid from preschool. Because I've also learned through my life that you don't know who you don't know. You know, like you just can't take things at face value.
Absolutely.
You never know how people will litter your life with beautiful moments, lessons, things. You just can't, and you can't get there unless you embrace everything and unless you're willing to value what everyone brings to the table. The moment we start like thinking that, oh, well, I don't belong with those people or I'm better than this or, you know, once we start putting those dividers up is when we start getting the oil in the water and we stop seeing eye to eye. When in reality, if you just let your guard down and you kind of embrace everybody as everybody, I think there's something to be learned in all of us.
Absolutely. Well, again, the mindset, the philosophy, the journey that you've been on to come up with all these ideas is what intrigued me to bring you on the show, because obviously, you know, specifically being a martial artist and I could ask you so many nerdy jiu-jitsu questions, you know, right now, but and you've had those interviews. But what I've tried to do in a short time, and I think I could probably talk to you for hours, but what I try to do in a short time is at least let people know a little bit more of who Emily is, not world champion Professor Emily Kwok. And that's a wonderful role that you play. But you also, I know the passion that you have as a martial artist enters the same way you approach being a mother, being a wife, being a friend. It's come out in all of your conversation that you can take every situation, whether it's a class full of people that are paying you, well, the person that's at Starbucks that you're having a conversation with is just as important to you. And I think, like the way you just eloquently said, if you approach life that way and open your mind and vulnerabilities to those around us, we all have an opportunity to share so many things in common and learn from one another and kind of, you know, run through this journey of life together and just do our best to get support from one another and learn from our errors. So I really want to say thank you, because I really appreciate your opportunity to be honest and open and vulnerable and share certain sides with you. Sometimes you speak with people that are known for their thing, you know, want to talk about their thing and they want to keep the personal side of them separate. So the fact that you were so open and honest to talk about just a few examples of what you've been through in life, I really think a lot of people are going to be able to connect with. From a martial arts standpoint, I do have to say as well, if anyone does follow you with jiu-jitsu and they're ever in the tri-state area, that they should absolutely check you guys out at Princeton Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The website, would you be able to give that real quick for me?
Yeah, you can check us out at princetonbjj.com.
All right, so princetonbjj.com. In addition, though, if they just type your name in, you know, on Google, you have so many educational videos out there. And I've been training in martial arts my entire life since I'm 8 years old. You have a unique skill set in teaching that not many teachers do. Like some people are very good at teaching, some are good practitioners. It's rare that you find the marriage of both being on point. But from a teacher standpoint and from a student standpoint, you have an incredible way of breaking things down in such a clear, precise way and connecting with people. And I know now from your philosophy of why you're trying to constantly ask yourself that question, did I show everything? I think that comes out across in your teaching. So if anyone's not familiar with what you do, I would definitely encourage them to look you up online and learn a little bit more. And if they have a chance to attend one of your seminars or classes, they would definitely wouldn't regret it. If they do want to follow you, Emily, online, whether it's your career or personally, what are some of the better ways they could find you other than Princeton BJJ? Do you have any, other websites or social media sites that you'd like to point everyone out to?
Yeah, they can. So I haven't brought myself to making like what is it, like an athlete page or something in Facebook. So I have I think right now I have like 40 spots for new friends on my Facebook account. And then outside of that, I've been trying to use Instagram a little more. So it's emily.rika.kwok. And you can interact with me there. I can't promise that I always respond to everybody that messages me, but I try. And yeah, I mean, I like social media for certain things, but I don't know that I'm one of these people that just wants to live like a filtered reality. So sometimes I'm really into social media and other times I'm not. So yeah.
Well, I will include all of this when I release the show, all the show notes, so links so that people could find you online. But I agree. I mean, social media has its pros and has its cons. So as long as you're, balancing reality of life and social media, I think you have a good approach. But nothing can beat the face-to-face interaction or even having a nice conversation with someone. And I think, barely scratch the surface. So at some point in the future, I'd love to have you on again. And I would even love to have, Jerry on as well. There's so many different things that I'd like to come up with, but I know that, we both have schedules that we have to get to. But I just wanted to thank you so much for, one more time for coming on and sharing your story with us a little bit. And, again, I always will remain a humble, student, friend and fan of yours and your family. I love you guys tremendously. And I think that you're doing a very, very amazing job at promoting martial arts, promoting jujitsu, but also unifying the culture of all these different backgrounds, men and women, and especially from a father of twin daughters, to be able to show them, and I use you honestly as an example often, to show them that, whether you're a girl or a boy, doesn't matter what you could achieve in this world, that if you stick with something long enough, you could literally, achieve world levels. And, in addition to you influencing everybody, I would imagine that, a lot of the females in this world look up to you tremendously for all that you do, and for giving them an opportunity to feel like that they could hang with the guys. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you so much for this time.
I appreciate it. Well, I would like to say one last thing to our guests that are, to the audience that's listening. Thank you one final time to today's Life's Black Belt, Professor Emily Kwok. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.